The stagecoach rattled into Salida, Colorado on a blistering afternoon in July of 1878, and Diana Harper gripped the handle of the hunting knife concealed in her carpetbag so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She had traveled over 1,000 miles from Philadelphia to marry a man she had never met, exchanging letters with Harrison Pierce for 6 months before deciding that anywhere was better than the life she was leaving behind. The mountain town sprawled before her in shades of brown and gold, nestled in the Arkansas River Valley, with peaks rising on all sides like sentinels guarding secrets she could not yet imagine. Dust hung in the air as the stage pulled to a stop outside the general store, and Diana's heart hammered against her ribs with such force she wondered if the other passengers could hear it. She stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, her dark blue traveling dress already dusty from the journey, her auburn hair escaping its pins, despite her best efforts to keep it contained. The altitude made her head feel light, or perhaps that was simply fear. 3 men stood near the hitching post, all wearing wide-brimmed hats and looking at her with varying degrees of curiosity. None of them stepped forward. Diana clutched her bag tighter and tried to remember what Harrison had written in his last letter about where to meet him. "Miss Diana Harper?" The voice came from behind her, deep and smooth, as river stones. She turned and found herself looking up at a man who stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. His eyes were the color of summer grass, startling against his sun-bronzed skin, and dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck where it brushed his collar. He held his hat in his hands, revealing those eyes fully, and something in her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Yes," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am looking for Harrison Pierce." The man's expression shifted, something like regret crossing his features. He glanced down at his boots, then met her eyes again. "I am Harrison Pierce, madam. I apologize for not recognizing you immediately." The stage was early. Diana studied him, trying to reconcile the man before her with the careful, formal letters she had received. He seemed younger than she had imagined, perhaps only 27 or 28 to her 23 years. His hands looked capable, scarred from work, and he held himself with a kind of quiet confidence that suggested he knew exactly who he was in this world. "You are not what I expected either," she admitted, then felt heat rise to her cheeks at the boldness of the statement. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "I hope that is not entirely a disappointment." "I did not say that." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the sounds of the town filling the space between them. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Men's voices carried from the saloon. The smell of bread baking drifted from a building nearby, reminding Diana she had not eaten since dawn. "I have a wagon waiting," Harrison said finally. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town. I thought we might get you settled before we discuss the arrangements." Arrangements. The word sat heavy between them, formal and businesslike. Diana nodded and followed him to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses, both bay with white blazes. Harrison lifted her trunk into the back as though it weighed nothing, then offered his hand to help her onto the seat. His palm was warm and calloused, and Diana felt the strength in his grip even though he was clearly being gentle. The ride out of town took them along a dirt road that followed the curve of the river. The water ran fast and clear over smooth stones, and cottonwood trees lined the banks, their leaves rustling in the breeze. Mountains rose on all sides, some still capped with snow despite the summer heat. Diana had never seen landscape like this. Philadelphia had been all cobblestones and brick buildings pressed close together, the sky a narrow strip between roof lines. Here the sky seemed endless, a blue so deep it almost hurt to look at. "It is beautiful," she said, because the silence had stretched too long and she needed to say something. "It can be harsh, too," Harrison replied, his eyes on the road ahead. "Winters get cold enough to freeze your breath in your lungs. Spring brings floods when the snow melts. Summer has fires sometimes, when lightning hits the dry grass. You are trying to scare me." He glanced at her then, and she saw surprise in his expression. "No, madam. I am trying to be honest. You came a long way based on letters that could not possibly tell you everything about what life is like out here. I want you to know what you are getting into before we proceed." Diana appreciated that, even as it made her more nervous. "And what am I getting into, Mr. Pierce?" "Harrison," he said. "Please. And as for what you are getting into, that depends on what you want." The ranch appeared as they crested a rise, a sprawling property with a two-story house painted white, a large barn, several outbuildings, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. More mountains rose behind it, creating a natural backdrop that took Diana's breath away. Harrison guided the wagon up the long drive and stopped near the front porch. "I built the house 3 years ago," he said, and Diana heard pride in his voice. "It has 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a parlor. There is a root cellar and a spring house for keeping things cold. The barn is new this past spring." "It is more than I expected," Diana said honestly. The house in Philadelphia, where she had worked as a seamstress, had been smaller than this, crowded with 6 other women and the stern widow who ran the boarding establishment. This looked like a real home. Harrison climbed down and came around to help her descend. When her feet touched the ground, he did not immediately release her hand. "Diana, before we go inside, I need to know something. In your last letter, you said you wanted to leave Philadelphia because you had no family left and no prospects. But you never said what you were running from." Her breath caught. She pulled her hand away and wrapped her arms around herself despite the heat. "What makes you think I am running from something?" "Because most people do not uproot their entire lives and travel 1,000 miles to marry a stranger unless they are running from something or running towards something desperate enough to make that gamble worth it." Diana turned away from him, looking at the mountains instead of his too perceptive eyes. "My father died when I was 16. My mother died 2 years ago. I worked as a seamstress, but the woman I worked for had a son who would not take no for an answer. When I told her what he was doing, she called me a liar and threw me out. I had nowhere else to go, no references, no way to get other work. I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, and it seemed like Providence." She heard Harrison exhale slowly behind her. "I am sorry that happened to you. Are you going to ask me to get back on the stage?" "Why would I do that?" "Because you married me sight unseen, and now you know I come with troubles." Harrison moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "Diana, everyone comes with troubles. I asked because I needed to know if someone was going to come looking for you, if that man or his mother might cause problems." "They will not," she said quietly. "They were glad to be rid of me." "Then there is no problem." He gestured toward the house. "Let me show you your room. We can discuss the rest after you have had time to rest and eat something." Diana followed him inside, and her breath caught at what she saw. The house was clean and well kept, with polished wood floors and windows that let in the mountain light. The furniture was simple but well made, and colorful rugs covered the floors. Harrison led her upstairs to a bedroom at the end of the hall. "This was supposed to be the guest room," he said, opening the door. "But I thought you should have it. It has the best view and it locks from the inside." Diana stepped into the room and saw a large bed covered with a wedding ring quilt, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a rocking chair by the window. The window itself looked out over the pastures to the mountains beyond, and the evening light painted everything in shades of gold and amber. "It is lovely," she whispered. "I will bring your trunk up," Harrison said. "Take your time. There is water in the pitcher, and I will have dinner ready in about an hour. The privy is out back, but there is a chamber pot under the bed if you need it." He left before she could thank him, his boots heavy on the stairs. Diana locked the door and sank onto the bed, her whole body trembling with relief and exhaustion. She had done it. She had escaped Philadelphia, escaped that grasping son and his vindictive mother, escaped the slow starvation of trying to survive with no money and no prospects. Whatever happened next, At least she was here, in this beautiful place, with a man who seemed decent. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her two other dresses in the wardrobe and placing her brush and hand mirror on the dresser. At the bottom of her carpet bag, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth, was the hunting knife her father had given her when she turned 15. It was 7 inches long with a bone handle, sharp enough to gut a fish or defend herself against worse things. Diana pulled it out and looked at it for a long moment, then slid it under her pillow. Old habits died hard. Dinner was beef stew with fresh bread, and Harrison turned out to be a better cook than Diana had expected. They ate at a table in the kitchen, the evening light slanting through the windows and painting everything amber. "Did you make the bread?" Diana asked, tearing off a piece and spreading butter on it. "I did. I have had to learn to do for myself out here. I have a woman from town who comes once a week to help with laundry and heavy cleaning, but otherwise I manage." "You will not need her anymore," Diana said. "I can do those things." Harrison set down his spoon and looked at her directly. "Diana, I want to make something clear. I am not looking for a servant. I am looking for a partner. I do not understand the difference. A servant does what she is told and has no say in how things are run. A partner helps make decisions, shares the work and the rewards, and has a voice in how we build our life together." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I spent 6 months writing to you because I wanted to know who you were as a person. I am not interested in just having someone to cook and clean. I want someone to share my life with." Diana felt something shift in her chest, a cautious hope that she was afraid to examine too closely. "And what if I am not good at being a partner? I have never done it before." "Neither have I," Harrison admitted. "So we will learn together." They finished eating in more comfortable silence, and Harrison insisted on doing the dishes, while Diana sat at the table and drank coffee that was strong enough to make her eyes water. When he had finished, he hung the dish towel to dry and turned to face her. "We need to talk about the marriage," he said. Diana's stomach clenched. "Yes. I sent the proxy papers to Philadelphia last month, and you signed them and sent them back. As far as the law is concerned, we are married. But I do not expect you to consider yourself truly married until you are ready. The bedroom I showed you upstairs is yours. I sleep in the room at the other end of the hall. You can lock your door, and I will not bother you. How long are you willing to wait?" The question came out before Diana could stop it. Harrison's expression was unreadable. "As long as it takes for you to trust me. A week, a month, a year, however long you need." "What if I never trust you?" "Then we will find a way to dissolve the marriage, and I will help you get set up somewhere with enough money to start over." "But I hope it does not come to that." He met her eyes, and Diana saw sincerity there that made her chest ache. "I hope you will give me a chance to prove that you are safe here." Diana nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Harrison bid her good night and headed upstairs, leaving her sitting at the kitchen table with her cooling coffee and her whirling thoughts. When she finally climbed the stairs to her room, she locked the door and changed into her nightgown, then slid the knife under her pillow as she had done every night for the past 2 years. She lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods, the creak of the house settling. It was nothing like Philadelphia, where the sounds of the city never truly stopped. Here, there was space between the sounds, room for silence to stretch out like something living. She did not know how long she lay there before she finally slept. The rooster woke her before dawn, and Diana rose to find that Harrison was already gone from the house. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find the stove still warm and a pot of coffee waiting. A note on the table read, "Gone to check the cattle. Back by mid-morning. Help yourself to anything in the pantry." Diana drank coffee and explored the house properly in the growing light. The pantry was well stocked with flour, sugar, beans, dried meat, and jars of preserved vegetables. The parlor had a fireplace, a comfortable sofa, and shelves lined with books. Diana ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles. There were novels by Dickens and Hawthorne, books about animal husbandry and crop rotation, a collection of Shakespeare's plays, and several volumes of poetry. She pulled out a book of Whitman's poems and settled onto the sofa to read. She was deep into Song of Myself when the front door opened and Harrison came in, dusty and smelling of horse and sweat. He stopped when he saw her curled on the sofa with his book. "I did not mean to startle you," he said. "I did not expect you to be awake yet." "The rooster had other ideas," Diana replied, marking her place and setting the book aside. "I hope you do not mind that I was reading." "Mind? I am glad someone is getting use out of them. I buy them when I go to Denver, but I do not always have time to read." He hesitated. "Would you like to see the rest of the ranch? I could saddle a horse for you if you know how to ride." "I have ridden before," Diana said, which was true, though it had been years since she had been on a horse. "I would like to see the property." Harrison's face lit up with a smile that transformed his features, and Diana felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. She changed into her most practical dress and met him at the barn, where he had saddled a gentle chestnut mare. "This is Rosie," he said, stroking the mare's neck. "She is as calm as they come. She will take care of you." Diana mounted with some difficulty, her muscles remembering a skill her mind had half forgotten. Harrison swung onto a tall black gelding with an ease that spoke of years in the saddle, and they set off at a walk toward the pastures. The ranch was larger than Diana had realized, sprawling across several hundred acres of valley land bordered by national forest. Harrison showed her the herd of cattle bearing his brand, the hay fields where he would cut and bale feed for winter, the line of cottonwoods that marked a creek running through the property. He explained how he had bought the land with money he had saved from working as a trail boss, how he had built the house and barn himself with help from neighbors, how he was slowly building something that would last. "Why did you want a mail order bride?" Diana asked as they paused to let the horses drink from the creek. "You seem to have everything a man could want. Surely there are women in town who would have married you." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the mountains. "There are 3 unmarried women in Salida under the age of 40, he said finally. "One is 17 and the daughter of the banker, who has made it clear he thinks she should marry someone more prominent than a rancher. One is a widow with 5 children who is still grieving her husband. And one is a woman I courted 2 years ago who decided she did not want to be married to someone who smelled like cattle and worked with his hands." "She sounds foolish," Diana said before she could stop herself. Harrison glanced at her, surprise and amusement in his expression. "I thought so too, but it still stung. After that, I decided I would rather write to someone far away and be honest about what my life was like than try to court someone locally and have them decide they wanted something different. At least with the letters, you knew what you were getting into." "Did I?" Diana asked. "You never mentioned you were handsome." The words hung in the air between them, and Diana felt her face go hot. Harrison stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, a genuine sound of delight that echoed off the mountains. "I did not think it was relevant," he said, still grinning. "But I am glad you think so." They rode back to the house in companionable silence, and Diana found herself relaxing in ways she had not expected. Harrison was easy to be around, neither demanding nor distant, and he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Harrison rose before dawn to tend the cattle and horses, while Diana took over the cooking and the cleaning. She baked bread and churned butter, washed clothes and hung them to dry in the mountain sun, weeded the vegetable garden behind the house, and picked beans and tomatoes for dinner. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that defied description. Harrison told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to handle cattle and horses, about the long trail drives north that had taught him everything about survival and nothing about softness. Diana told him about Philadelphia, about her father, who had been a carpenter, and her mother, who had taken in mending to make ends meet, about learning to sew and finding joy in creating something beautiful from fabric and thread. Why did your father give you a knife? Harrison asked one evening, the question coming out of nowhere. Diana tensed. How did you know about that? I saw it when I brought your trunk upstairs that first day. The oilcloth had come unwrapped. He was quiet for a moment. You do not have to tell me if you do not want to. Diana considered staying silent, but something about the evening, about the way Harrison had been careful with her from the first moment, made her want to be honest. My father said every woman should know how to protect herself. He taught me how to use it, how to hold it, where to strike if someone tried to hurt me. And have you had to use it? Once, Diana said quietly. A man tried to drag me into an alley when I was walking home from work. I cut his arm and ran. After that, I never went anywhere without it. Harrison was silent, and when Diana glanced at him, she saw anger in the set of his jaw. I am glad you had it, he said finally. I am glad you know how to defend yourself. But Diana, I meant what I said that first day. You will not need it here. How can you be sure? He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Because I will make sure you are safe. Because this ranch is yours as much as it is mine now, and anyone who tries to hurt you will have to go through me first. And because I am asking you to trust me, not blind trust, but the kind of trust that is earned over time by proving I mean what I say. Diana felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back. I want to trust you, I do, but it is hard. I know, Harrison said gently, but we have time. There is no rush. That night, Diana lay in bed with the knife under her pillow as always, but for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. The next morning, she woke to the sound of voices outside. Diana dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Harrison talking to an older man on the porch, gray-haired and weathered with kind eyes. Diana, this is Doc Martin, Harrison said. He is the closest thing Salida has to a physician. Doc, this is my wife, Diana. The word wife sent a thrill through her that Diana tried to ignore. Doc Martin tipped his hat and smiled. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Pierce. I heard Harrison had sent for a bride and wanted to come by to welcome you to the area. That is very kind, Diana said, liking the man immediately. Would you like some coffee? They sat in the kitchen, and Doc Martin told stories about the early days of Salida, about the railroad coming through and bringing prosperity and problems in equal measure. He asked Diana about her journey west, and she found herself telling him about the long days on the train, the way the landscape had changed from green hills to endless plains to mountains that scraped the sky. It is different out here, Doc Martin said. Harder in some ways, easier in others. But there are good people, and the town looks after its own. If you ever need anything, you just let me know. After he left, Diana turned to Harrison. That was thoughtful of him. He is a good man, Harrison agreed. He delivered half the babies in the valley and patched up the other half when they got into trouble as young fools. He hesitated. Diana, there is a dance in town on Saturday night. I was wondering if you would like to go. It would be a chance for you to meet more people, to start making friends. Diana felt a flutter of nervousness. I have not danced in years. Neither have I. We will stumble around together and blame it on the altitude. She found herself smiling. All right. Yes, I would like to go. Saturday arrived hot and clear, and Diana spent the afternoon washing her hair and pressing her best dress, a green silk that had been her mother's and was the finest thing she owned. When she came downstairs, Harrison was waiting in the parlor wearing clean trousers, a white shirt, and a string tie. He had shaved and combed his hair, and Diana felt her heart skip when he looked up and saw her. You look beautiful, he said quietly. You clean up well yourself, Diana replied, and was rewarded with one of his rare smiles. The ride into town was pleasant. the evening cool enough to make Diana glad for her shawl. Salida was alive with activity, music spilling out of the community hall and lanterns strung between the buildings. Harrison helped her down from the wagon and offered his arm, and Diana took it, feeling suddenly nervous. Inside, the hall was crowded with people dancing, talking, and laughing. A fiddle player and a man with a guitar provided the music, and the wooden floor thundered with the stomp of boots. Harrison introduced her to so many people that Diana lost track of names, but everyone was welcoming, curious about the woman Harrison had sent for. "May I have this dance?" Harrison asked when the musician struck up a waltz. Diana nodded and let him lead her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, and she rested her hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric of his shirt. They moved together awkwardly at first, both of them out of practice, but gradually they found a rhythm that worked. "You are doing fine," Harrison murmured near her ear. "You are a terrible liar," Diana replied, and felt him laugh, the vibration traveling through where their bodies touched. They danced several more dances, and Diana found herself enjoying it more than she had expected. Other men asked her to dance as well, and Harrison stepped back graciously, though Diana noticed he never took his eyes off her. When a man with whiskey on his breath got too bold with his hands, Diana saw Harrison move, but she had already stepped away and returned to Harrison's side. "I can handle myself," she said quietly. "I know," Harrison replied, "but that does not mean I like watching it." They left around midnight, and the ride home was quiet, both of them tired but content. When they reached the house, Harrison helped Diana down from the wagon, and for a moment they stood close together in the moonlight, the smell of sage and pine sharp in the air. "Thank you for taking me," Diana said. "Thank you for going," Harrison replied. "For giving this a chance, for being here." Diana reached up and touched his face, feeling the rasp of stubble under her palm. Harrison went very still, his eyes searching hers in the darkness. Then Diana stepped back, sudden shyness overwhelming her. "Good night, Harrison." "Good night, Diana." She went inside and upstairs, her heart pounding. That night, she lay in bed thinking about the way Harrison had looked at her, the way his hand had felt at her waist, the way she had not wanted to pull away. The knife was still under her pillow, but it felt less necessary somehow, less like the only thing standing between her and danger. Summer deepened into August, and the days took on a pattern that Diana found comforting. She tended the garden and put up vegetables for winter, made jam from the wild raspberries that grew along the creek, and learned to bake sourdough bread from a starter Doc Martin's wife gave her. Harrison taught her to handle a rifle so she could protect the chickens from foxes, and Diana proved to be a good shot, steady and calm. They talked more, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for the future. Harrison wanted to expand the herd, to build a bunkhouse so he could hire help during calving season. Diana talked about maybe raising chickens to sell eggs in town, about starting a business doing custom sewing and alterations. Harrison listened to all of it and encouraged her, never dismissing her ideas as impractical or unfeminine. One evening in late August, they were sitting on the porch watching a storm roll in over the mountains when Harrison said, "Diana, can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask," she replied, not committing to answering. "That first night after I brought your trunk upstairs, I saw the knife. Has it stayed under your pillow every night since you have been here?" Diana tensed, her instinct to lie warring with her growing trust in this man. "Yes," she said finally. "Every night." Harrison nodded slowly. "Do you still feel like you need it?" Diana thought about that, really thought about it. Did she still feel unsafe here? Harrison had been nothing but respectful, kind, patient. He had never raised his voice to her, never made a demand she was not comfortable with, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. The ranch felt like home now in a way Philadelphia never had. And yet the habit was so ingrained, the knife such a constant companion, that the idea of sleeping without it made her anxious. "I do not know," she admitted. "Part of me knows I do not need it." but part of me is afraid to let it go. What are you afraid will happen if you do? That I will be vulnerable again, that I will be helpless. Harrison reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and rough against hers. Diana, you are the strongest woman I have ever met. You traveled 1,000 miles alone to start a new life. You learned to shoot and garden and run a household in a place completely foreign to you. You stand up to me when you think I am wrong, and you are not afraid to speak your mind. You are not helpless, with or without that knife. Diana felt tears spill down her cheeks. I want to believe that. Then believe it, but Diana, I am not asking you to give up the knife. I am just asking you to think about what it means that you still feel you need it. Because if you still feel unsafe here after all these weeks, then I need to know what I can do differently. You have done everything right, Diana said, her voice breaking. You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect. This is not about you. It is about me and my fear and the things that happened before I came here. Harrison squeezed her hand. Then we will work on it together. And whenever you are ready to sleep without that knife, you will know. But there is no rush, Diana. No pressure. I just want you to be happy here. That night, Diana lay in bed with the knife under her pillow, but she thought about what Harrison had said. She thought about how safe she felt on the ranch, how she had not flinched when Harrison touched her hand, how she had been sleeping deeper and waking more rested than she had in years. The knife was a talisman against a past that was fading, a reminder of pain she no longer carried as sharply. 3 days later, Diana woke in the morning and reached under her pillow out of habit. Her fingers closed around the bone handle, and she pulled the knife out and looked at it in the early light. It was still sharp, still deadly, still capable of protecting her if she needed it. But Harrison was right. She did not need it. Not here. Not anymore. She got dressed and went downstairs with the knife in her hand. Harrison was at the stove making breakfast, and he turned when he heard her come in. His eyes went to the knife, and his expression became carefully neutral. Diana, she set the knife on the table between them. I do not need this anymore, she said quietly. Not here. Not with you. Harrison stared at her for a long moment, and Diana saw the emotion that crossed his face before he controlled it. Are you sure? I am sure. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, and Diana melted against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body and the rapid beat of his heart. His arms were strong around her, holding her like she was something precious, and Diana buried her face against his chest and breathed in the smell of him, soap and coffee, and the faint scent of hay. Thank you, Harrison murmured against her hair. Thank you for trusting me. Diana pulled back just enough to look up at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her brave. She rose on her toes and kissed him, a soft press of lips that lasted only a moment. Harrison went rigid with surprise. Then his arms tightened around her, and he kissed her back, gentle and questioning. Diana answered by threading her fingers through his hair and pulling him closer, and Harrison groaned low in his throat and deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Harrison rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I have wanted to do that since the day you stepped off that stage, he admitted. What took you so long? Diana asked and felt him laugh. I was trying to be respectful, trying to give you time. I have had enough time, Diana said. I know what I want now. And what is that? She pulled back and met his eyes. I want this to be a real marriage. I want to be your wife in every way that matters. I want to share your bed and your life and build something together, if you still want that too. Diana, I have wanted nothing else since the day I met you, Harrison said fiercely. But I need you to be sure. I need you to know that once we cross this line, I am all in. I will love you with everything I have for as long as I live. So you need to be absolutely certain this is what you want. Diana cupped his face in her hands, feeling the rasp of morning stubble against her palms. I am certain. I love you, Harrison. I think I have been falling in love with you since that first day when you told me you wanted a partner, not a servant. But I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself. I love you too, Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. God, Diana, I love you so much it scares me sometimes. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. Diana lost herself in the kiss, in the feel of his hands at her waist, in the way he made her feel cherished and desired and safe all at once. When Harrison finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with want. We should eat breakfast, he said, but he made no move to release her. Breakfast can wait, Diana replied, and took his hand, leading him toward the stairs. They made love slowly, carefully, Harrison giving Diana time to adjust and change her mind if she needed to. But Diana did not want to change her mind. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to seal the bond between them in the most intimate way possible. Harrison was gentle and patient, and thoroughly devoted to her pleasure, and when they finally lay tangled together in his bed, Diana felt a peace she had never known. No regrets? Harrison asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. None, Diana said firmly. You? Only that I did not do that sooner, Harrison replied, and Diana laughed and swatted his chest. They spent the rest of the morning in bed, talking and touching and learning each other's bodies. Diana told Harrison things she had never told anyone, about her fear of ending up like her mother, worn down by work and worry, about her dreams of having children and giving them a better life than she had known. Harrison told her about his own childhood, about a father who drank too much and a mother who died young, about learning early that the only person he could rely on was himself. Until now, he said, kissing her temple. Now I have you. Now you have me, Diana agreed. They fell back into their routine, but everything felt different now, charged with a new intimacy. Diana moved her belongings into Harrison's room, and they spent their nights wrapped around each other, sharing dreams and worries in the darkness. The knife stayed in a drawer, unused but not thrown away, a reminder of where Diana had come from and how far she had traveled. September brought cooler weather and the start of harvest. Harrison hired men from town to help cut and bale the hay, and Diana cooked for the work crew, massive meals of stew and biscuits and apple pie. The men were respectful and kind, tipping their hats and thanking her for the food, and Diana felt herself becoming part of the community in a way she never had in Philadelphia. One evening in late September, Diana realized her monthly bleeding had not come. She counted back the days and felt her heart begin to race. She said nothing to Harrison at first, afraid to hope, afraid to jinx it. But when another week passed with no blood, she finally told him. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, and Diana took his hand and pressed it to her still flat stomach. I think I am carrying your child, she said quietly. Harrison went very still. Then he turned to look at her, and the joy in his face made Diana's eyes fill with tears. Are you sure? As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. My courses have not come, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Harrison pulled her into his lap and held her, his face buried against her neck. Diana felt his shoulders shake and realized he was crying. She ran her fingers through his hair and let him process, understanding that this meant as much to him as it did to her. I did not think I would ever have this, Harrison said finally, his voice thick. A wife who loved me, a child on the way, a real family. I thought I would spend my life alone on this ranch, building something with no one to leave it to. You are not alone anymore, Diana said. You have me, and soon you will have a baby. We are a family, Harrison. Whatever happens, we face it together. They went to see Doc Martin the next day, and he confirmed what Diana already knew. She was about 2 months along, healthy and strong, and the baby should come in late April or early May. Harrison was impossible for days afterward, grinning like a fool and talking about building a cradle and adding on to the house. Winter arrived early that year, snow falling in October and blanketing the valley in white. Diana spent her days inside, sewing baby clothes and knitting blankets, while Harrison tended the cattle and kept the fires going. They were snowed in for days at a time, but Diana did not mind. She had everything she needed right here in this house with this man. Christmas came and went, celebrated quietly with roast chicken and gifts they made for each other. Harrison carved Diana a jewelry box with mountains etched into the lid, and Diana sewed him a heavy winter coat lined with flannel. They went to the Christmas service in town on Christmas Eve, and Diana felt the baby flutter for the first time during the singing of Silent Night. She pressed Harrison's hand to her belly, and his face lit up when he felt the tiny movements. "That is our child," he whispered in awe. "That is our child," Diana agreed. January and February were the hardest months, the cold, brutal, and unrelenting. Harrison worried constantly about the cattle, about Diana, about whether they had enough wood and food to last until spring. But Diana had grown up poor and knew how to stretch provisions, and they made it through without serious hardship. March brought the first hints of warmth, and Diana's belly swelled until she could no longer see her feet. Harrison helped her with everything, patient and tender, and Diana fell more in love with him every day. He talked to the baby through her belly, telling stories about the ranch and the mountains, about the life they would have together. April arrived with wildflowers and the sound of the creek running high with snow melt. Diana was huge and uncomfortable, waddling more than walking. But she had never been happier. Harrison had built a beautiful cradle from cherry wood, and Diana had sewn tiny gowns and knitted soft blankets, and everything was ready. The baby came on a warm evening in late April, after a day of hard labor that left Diana exhausted and triumphant. Doc Martin and his wife attended the birth, and when the baby finally slipped into the world, Diana heard the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, her child's first cry. "It is a boy," Doc Martin announced, laying the baby on Diana's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Diana looked down at the tiny, perfect human she had made and felt love so fierce it took her breath away. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn green like Harrison's. His little fists waved in the air and his cries were loud and indignant. "He has a good set of lungs," Diana said, laughing through her tears. Harrison was beside her, staring at his son with wonder. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Diana, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Henry Samuel Pierce, after both of their fathers, and he became the center of their world. Harrison was a devoted father, patient and gentle with the baby, singing to him and walking him when he fussed. Diana nursed him and marveled at every tiny change, every new sound and expression. The months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful days. Henry grew fat and happy, his smiles lighting up their world. Harrison hired a hand to help with the ranch work so he could spend more time with his family, and Diana started taking in sewing work from women in town, earning money and making friends. On their first wedding anniversary, Harrison took Diana into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was a rare night away from the baby, who was being watched by Doc Martin's wife, and Diana felt strange without Henry in her arms. "We should go back," she said halfway through dinner. "What if he needs me?" "He is fine," Harrison said, laughing. "And we deserve one evening to ourselves." After dinner, they walked through town in the warm evening air, and Harrison pulled her into the shadow of a building and kissed her thoroughly. "Thank you," he said against her lips. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me, for getting on that stage and traveling 1,000 miles to marry a stranger, for trusting me enough to let down your guard, for giving me a son and a family, and a reason to wake up happy every morning." Diana felt tears prick her eyes. "I should be thanking you. You saved me, Harrison. You gave me a home and a purpose and love beyond anything I ever dreamed possible." "We saved each other," Harrison said. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret it," Diana said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They went home and made love quietly, careful not to wake the baby sleeping in his cradle beside their bed. And afterward, lying in Harrison's arms, Diana thought about the knife that still lay in the drawer, untouched for months. She thought about the woman who had stepped off that stage a year ago, frightened and alone with a weapon hidden in her bag. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from another life. Diana had not needed the knife because Harrison had given her something better, safety built on trust and respect, a partnership forged in honesty and deepened by love. She had found her home, not in a place, but in a person, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would never need to sleep with a knife under her pillow again. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Henry learned to walk and talk, charming everyone with his bright green eyes and infectious laugh. Diana had another baby 2 years later, a daughter they named Dorothy Louise, who had Diana's auburn hair and Harrison's quiet determination. The ranch prospered, the herd growing year by year, and Harrison built the bunkhouse he had dreamed of. Diana's sewing business grew as well, and women came from miles around for her custom work. She hired 2 girls from town to help her, teaching them the skills her mother had taught her, and took pride in knowing she was giving them opportunities they might not otherwise have had. On a warm evening in June, 5 years after Diana had first arrived in Salida, she sat on the porch watching Harrison play with their children in the yard. Henry was 5 now, tall and sturdy, chasing his father around while Dorothy toddled after them on unsteady legs. The sun painted the mountains gold, and the smell of roses drifted from the garden Diana had planted their second summer. Harrison looked up and caught her watching, and the smile he gave her was full of such love and contentment that Diana felt her heart swell. He came up onto the porch, scooping Dorothy up as he passed, and settled beside Diana with their daughter in his lap. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," Diana replied honestly. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life, that I get to have this, have you, have all of it." Harrison shifted Dorothy to one arm so he could take Diana's hand. "Do you ever think about that first night, about the knife and how scared you were?" "Sometimes," Diana admitted. "But it feels like it happened to someone else, like a story I heard rather than something I lived." "You were so brave," Harrison said quietly. "Coming out here alone, not knowing what you would find, trusting me when you had every reason not to trust anyone." "You made it easy to trust you," Diana said. "From that first day when you told me I would not need the knife, you proved over and over that you meant it. You gave me time and space and patience, and you let me come to you when I was ready. I would have waited forever if that was what you needed." Diana leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the mountains turned purple in the fading light. Henry came running up, demanding a story, and Harrison settled both children on his lap and began to tell them about the wild horses that used to run free in the valley. Diana watched her family and felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She had left Philadelphia with nothing but a carpet bag and a knife, running from a life that had grown intolerable. She had arrived in Salida terrified and defensive, expecting the worst and hoping desperately for something better. What she had found was beyond her wildest dreams. She had found a partner who treated her as an equal, a love that grew deeper every day, and a family that filled her heart to overflowing. She had found her place in the world, here in this valley surrounded by mountains. In this house she had made a home with this man who had promised she would be safe and had spent every day since proving it. The knife still lay in the drawer upstairs, cleaned and oiled but never used. Diana kept it not because she thought she might need it, but as a reminder of where she had come from and how far she had traveled. It was a talisman of survival, a symbol of the strength she had not known she possessed. But she did not need it anymore. She had something better now. She had Harrison's love and her children's laughter and a life she had built through courage and hope. She had roots sunk deep into this mountain soil and a future that stretched bright before her. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Diana took Harrison's hand and thought about all the nights she had lain awake in Philadelphia, afraid and alone, wondering if there was something better waiting for her somewhere beyond the narrow streets and tall buildings. She thought about the advertisements she had seen in the newspaper, about the letters she and Harrison had exchanged, about the leap of faith it had taken to board that train and travel into the unknown. It had been worth it. Every moment of fear, every second of doubt, every mile of that long journey had been worth it to arrive here, in this moment, with this family she loved more than life itself. Diana? Harrison's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Where did you go? Just remembering, she said, smiling at him. Just being grateful. For what? For everything. For you. For taking a chance on a mail order bride who showed up with a knife in her bag and fear in her eyes. Harrison's expression softened, and he pulled her close, careful not to disturb the children who were starting to doze in his lap. That mail order bride was the bravest woman I ever met, and I thank God every day that she took a chance on me. Later, after the children were asleep in their beds and the house was quiet, Diana and Harrison lay together in the darkness. Harrison's hand rested on her hip, his breath warm against her neck. Harrison, Diana whispered. Do you remember what you said to me that first night? About the knife? I told you that you would not need it here. You were right, Diana said, turning in his arms to face him. I do not need it. I have not needed it for years, because you gave me something better than a weapon to protect myself with. What is that? A home, a real home where I am safe and loved and valued, a partnership built on trust, a life worth living. She kissed him softly. You gave me everything I needed without even realizing it. You gave me yourself. Harrison pulled her closer, and Diana felt the steady beat of his heart against her chest. You gave me the same, he murmured. Before you came, this was just a ranch, just land and cattle and an empty house. You made it a home. You made it matter. They held each other in the darkness, and Diana thought about how lucky she was. She had taken the biggest risk of her life when she answered Harrison's advertisement, had gambled everything on the hope that a stranger 1,000 miles away might offer her a better life than the one she was leaving. The gamble had paid off beyond her wildest dreams. She had found not just safety, but love, not just shelter, but home, not just survival, but a life rich with meaning and purpose. Years continued to unfold like the pages of a treasured book. Diana and Harrison added 2 more children to their family, twin boys they named James and Joseph, who arrived in the spring of Diana's 30th year. The ranch continued to prosper, and Harrison bought more land, expanding their holdings until they had one of the largest operations in the valley. Diana's sewing business eventually became a proper shop in town, with 3 employees and a reputation for quality that brought customers from as far away as Denver. She loved the work, loved creating beautiful things with her hands, loved teaching young women the skills that gave them independence and purpose. Through it all, Harrison remained her rock, her partner in every sense of the word. They weathered droughts and hard winters, the death of friends and neighbors, the growing pains of their children. They celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, graduations and weddings, when their children grew up and started families of their own. On their 25th anniversary, Harrison took Diana back to Salida, and they had dinner at the same hotel restaurant where they had celebrated their first anniversary. They were older now, both of them showing threads of gray in their hair and lines on their faces, earned through years of laughter and worry and love. Do you remember the woman who stepped off that stage 25 years ago? Harrison asked, raising his glass in a toast. I remember her, Diana said. She was so frightened, so certain that something would go wrong, that she would end up hurt or worse. What would you tell her if you could? Diana thought about that, really thought about it. I would tell her that everything is going to be all right, that she is about to meet the love of her life, and that all the fear and pain she has endured will fade until it is nothing but a distant memory. I would tell her to trust the cowboy with the green eyes who tells her she will not need the knife because he means every word he says. Harrison reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb rubbing across her knuckles in a gesture that had become familiar over the decades. I would tell the young cowboy, who was so nervous about meeting his mail order bride, that she is going to change his life in ways he cannot imagine, that she is going to be strong and brave and beautiful, and that he is going to fall in love with her the moment she steps off that stage with her chin up and fire in her eyes. I was terrified, Diana protested, laughing. You were magnificent, Harrison corrected. You still are. They finished their dinner and walked through town hand in hand, past the church where their children had been baptized, past the school where they had learned to read and write, past the shop where Diana still worked 3 days a week. Salida had grown over the years, the railroad bringing prosperity and change, but the core of the town remained the same. Good people, working hard and looking out for each other. When they returned to the ranch, the house was full of their children and grandchildren gathered for a surprise celebration. Henry was there with his wife and 3 daughters. Dorothy had come from Denver with her husband and son. The twins had brought their families as well, filling the house with noise and laughter and the chaos Diana had always loved. They ate cake and told stories late into the night, and when everyone had finally gone home or settled into the guest rooms, Diana and Harrison climbed the stairs to their bedroom. Diana paused at the dresser and opened the drawer where the knife had remained all these years, untouched but not forgotten. I think it is time, she said quietly. Time for what? Time to give this to someone who needs it more than I do. She lifted the knife and turned it over in her hands. It served its purpose. It kept me safe when I had no one else to protect me. But I do not need that protection anymore. Maybe someone else does. Harrison came to stand beside her, and Diana felt his hand warm on her shoulder. What do you have in mind? There is a girl in town, Emma. She works at the hotel. I have seen the way some of the men look at her, and I have seen the fear in her eyes. She reminds me of who I used to be. Diana looked up at Harrison. I want to give her the knife and teach her how to use it. And I want to let her know that being afraid does not mean being weak, and that there are people who will help her if she asks. You have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known, Harrison said, pulling her close. I learned from the best, Diana replied, wrapping her arms around him. You taught me that safety comes from love and respect, not from weapons or fear. But sometimes, until you find that love and respect, you need something to keep you safe. I want to give Emma that chance. The next day, Diana went into town and found Emma sweeping the floor of the hotel lobby. The girl looked up when Diana approached, and Diana saw herself in those wary eyes, in the tension in those thin shoulders. Emma, may I speak with you for a moment? They sat in the hotel parlor, and Diana pulled the knife from her bag and laid it on the table between them. Emma's eyes went wide. 25 years ago, I came to Salida as a mail order bride, Diana said quietly. I had this knife in my bag, and I slept with it under my pillow because I was so afraid of what might happen to me. I did not know if I could trust the man I was marrying. I did not know if I would be safe. Emma's hands trembled in her lap. What happened? I met a man who taught me that I did not need to be afraid anymore, who showed me through his actions that I could trust him, who built a life with me based on respect and partnership and love. Diana pushed the knife across the table. But I know that not every woman is as lucky as I was. I have seen the way some men look at you, Emma. I recognize the fear in your eyes because I used to see it in my own mirror. Emma looked at the knife, but did not reach for it. Why are you giving this to me? Because every woman deserves to feel safe. Because you should not have to live in fear. This knife is not a solution. Emma, it is not going to fix everything, but it might give you the confidence to know that you can protect yourself if you need to. And I want you to know that if you ever need help, if you ever need a safe place, my door is always open. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out slowly to touch the bone handle. I do not know what to say. Say you will be careful. Say you will take care of yourself. And say that if you ever need anything, you will come find me. Emma nodded, clutching the knife to her chest. Thank you, Mrs. Pierce. You do not know what this means. But Diana did know. She knew exactly what it meant because she had been there. She had been the frightened woman with nowhere to turn, and she knew how much it mattered to have someone extend a hand, to have someone say that your fear was valid and your safety mattered. Diana left the hotel feeling lighter, as though she had set down a burden she had been carrying for 25 years. The knife had served its purpose in her life, and now it would serve its purpose in someone else's. And perhaps someday, when Emma no longer needed it, she would pass it on to another woman who did. That evening, Diana told Harrison what she had done, and he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. I am so proud of you, he murmured against her hair. You took something that represented fear and pain and turned it into hope for someone else. You taught me how to do that, Diana said. You taught me that the past does not have to define the future, that we can choose to be different, to be better, to build something new. They stood on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains, the sky ablaze with color. The ranch spread out before them, generations of work and love and commitment made tangible in every fence post and barn beam. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Do you ever regret it? Harrison asked quietly. Taking that leap of faith? Leaving everything you knew to come here? Diana thought about the life she had left behind in Philadelphia, the narrow room in the boarding house, the fear that had been her constant companion. She thought about the journey west, the uncertainty and anxiety that had kept her awake at night. And then she thought about everything she had gained, this man beside her, the family they had created, the life they had built together. Never, she said firmly. Not for one single moment. This life, this place, this family, it is everything I never knew I wanted, everything I did not dare dream was possible. Harrison took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I love you, Diana Harper Pierce. I have loved you since the moment you stepped off that stage with your chin up and determination in your eyes. And I will love you until the day I die. I love you too, Diana said, her voice thick with emotion. You showed me what it means to be safe, to be cherished, to be loved. You proved that I did not need a knife under my pillow because I had something better, a partner who would stand beside me, protect me, and build a life with me based on trust and respect. They stood together as the stars began to appear, the same stars that had shone on them that first night 25 years ago when Diana had lain in the guest room with the knife under her pillow, afraid and uncertain. Those stars had witnessed her journey from fear to trust, from loneliness to love, from surviving to thriving. Diana thought about the mail-order bride who had arrived in Salida with nothing but a carpetbag and a weapon, and she marveled at how far that woman had come. She had found her home, not in a place, but in a person, and in doing so had discovered that the greatest safety came not from blades and vigilance, but from love freely given and faithfully maintained. The cowboy had been right. She had not needed the knife, not then and not now, because what she had found in this valley, in this house with this man, was something no weapon could provide, a love that was strong enough to cast out fear, deep enough to weather any storm, and enduring enough to last a lifetime and beyond. And as Diana stood on the porch with Harrison's arms around her, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. That, taking that leap of faith, boarding that train, and traveling into the unknown had been the best decision of her life. She had come to Colorado looking for survival and had found so much more. She had found love, purpose, family, and home. She had found herself, strong and capable, and worthy of all the good things that had come her way. And she had found peace, the kind of deep, abiding peace that came from knowing you were exactly where you belonged, with exactly the right person, living exactly the right life. The mail order bride who had slept with a knife under her pillow had become a woman who needed no weapons because she had something infinitely more powerful: love that conquered fear, trust that banished doubt, and a partnership that made everything possible. Harrison had promised she would not need the knife, and he had been absolutely right. What she had needed was him, and the life they had built together, and the love that had grown between them stronger and deeper with each passing year. As the last light faded from the sky and the mountains became dark silhouettes against the stars, Diana leaned back against Harrison's chest and smiled. This was her life. This was her home. This was her happily ever after, hard won and deeply cherished, built on a foundation of trust and sealed with a love that would endure long after they were both gone, living on in their children and their children's children, a legacy of hope and courage and the transformative power of taking a chance on love.